is anyone currently, or was anyone in the past, a Lego fanatic like me? Anybody? Okay, we got a lot of like-minded people in the room tonight. And by the way, you guys in the back, there are some seats still spread out over here, especially if you want to speak. But if you're vibing back there, I might be sitting back there honestly if I was listening, so I respect it. But and all my Lego fans, okay, I got a story for you. It happened when I was probably like 10 or 11. I don't even remember. I've told this story several times to our youth students. Some of you guys might have heard this before, but it's one of my favorite stories to tell because it was so traumatic. Okay, we're gonna trauma bond together a little bit. Okay, if you're a Lego fan, and it happened that my brother and I, my older brother and I, built the coolest creation we had ever thought of, okay? We loved to build things from our own imagination, right? Like, it was cool to get the sets and build it from the instructions, but it was even cooler, right, to make something yourself. That was our, at least, way of ranking the coolness of Legos. You know, that's what 10, 11, 12-year-olds do. We built an Apache helicopter, okay? It was so cool. The rotors like spun and everything. We made it fly. No, it didn't actually fly, but it was really cool, and we put so much time and effort into it. Legit, it was like the length of this little table I got up here, and like stood probably like as tall as my Bible that way. And so it was a big deal. We spent a lot of time making this thing, and then my little sister opened the door one day, and me and my brother were playing with some other Legos, maybe some Bionicles. Anybody? Over here? Yeah, let's go. You guys are my people. Anyway, we're playing over here, and the door is here. Our Apache helicopter is kind of like on display, right? We were using it in the giant battlefield, right? The war was going crazy. Anyway, my sister opens the door, and she's just got this look of terror and destruction in her eyes. Okay, she's 2 years younger than me, so at this time she's little, right? And me and my brother like freeze, and I remember the story in slow motion, right? She just starts like Godzilla, right? Just stomping over, and me and my brother are like, no. And she takes her little foot and just shatters our Apache helicopter. So me and my brother are bawling. She's bawling because she just stepped on Legos, right? We're all crying. It's a disaster. And that's my story. We never rebuilt the helicopter. We were too sad. And the whole reason I bring that up, aside from just getting a couple laughs, because it is a funny story that I look back on, that maybe you guys can relate to. It kind of points to some deeper stories about siblings, right? Who's got siblings in the room? Maybe if you're an only child, who's got like a best friend, you know, that you grew up with that maybe is like a sibling. And we've all had experiences in our lives, maybe not around an Apache helicopter, maybe around something else, where we butt heads with those siblings. And I want to get us in that frame of mind because, like Sophia said, we are jumping into the story of Joseph tonight, and much of this story has to do with siblings and sibling drama, sibling kind of relationship dynamics. So just kind of keep that in your mind as we dive in tonight. But before we get to our passage, before we jump into this story, I want to give you guys our big idea right from the top. This is it. It's God's purpose will prevail no matter what. God's purpose will prevail no matter what. And if I'm honest in my life, sometimes this is hard to believe. If I'm honest, sometimes, you know, like 10, 11-year-old me thought it was hard to believe when the helicopter was getting destroyed, but in a more real sense, this is challenging to really keep at the front of my mind, to really seep into my heart when things aren't going well. When I'm encountering struggles, when the drama in my family isn't just silly, it's serious. When there's things going on that I can't understand and it's hard to reconcile with the story that I'm being told about a good God who cares about me. I don't know if anybody else can relate to me tonight, but I've had a hard time in my life believing this. Even though I truly do think it's true, I've had a hard time really settling with it in my soul. And I don't know if any of you guys can relate to me tonight, but if you can, I think that this story can be really helpful for you. Because the story of Joseph is the story of a guy who was betrayed, a guy who was accused and thrown into prison. He was forgotten and left to rot. And I don't know if any of you can relate to any of those things, that in our lives sometimes we do feel betrayed. Sometimes we feel like someone is making us out to be someone we're not. And everything that we're trying to build up about ourselves, our reputation, gets torn down. And what do we do with that? How do we keep going? And what the heck does God have to do with any of it? If he's so good, if he loves us so much, why isn't he doing something? If we're honest, I think we feel that in our lives. And again, if that's you, I would encourage you to open up this story with me and see what it has to say about somebody like us. This story really kicks off in Genesis chapter 37. And if you are going through the Bible plan with us, it lines up like almost perfectly. We read this yesterday, and then today we got into more of the story. But Genesis 37 verse 3 is where we're going to start. Come back to, in your mind, some sibling drama, some relationship, family issues, okay? If you can think of it, I'm sorry, but think of it in the context of this story, okay? Here we go. It says, now Israel, that's Jacob, loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. Jacob, Joseph's father, while he's literally one of the three beginning patriarchs of the people of God in the Old Testament, right? It's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We see right here, if you really think about this verse, he's got some issues, right? The family that he has started has some issues. Clearly there's favoritism here. Clearly there's a dynamic where there's a lot of brokenness. There's a lot of different family issues happening that you just get a picture of. If you were reading along with us, you've heard about it more, but there's multiple wives involved. There's all kinds of different situations with each of them, rivalries, and it's same with the kids. And here, exemplified by this favoritism being shown, we have Joseph. He's 17 years old here, so think back a year for the freshman in the house, maybe. Joseph is the favorite child. He's got his Technicolor coat, okay? Who grew up with the stories with like the rainbow coat? You know, you can think of it a little bit. But Joseph, even himself, at the beginning of this story, he's kind of playing into it too, right? He's telling his brothers that he's so much better than them. That's what his dream was all about. They hated him so much. Has anybody ever, this is just kind of a funny question. Has anybody ever hated a sibling? I have, right? It's the sister breaking my Legos. But here's another question. Has anybody ever sold their sibling into slavery? I hope not, right? I hope not. We'll look around the room. That's what happens in this story. There's a valid, I think, feeling. There's a valid feeling of anger, right? Of frustration. But the brothers take it really far, right? They take it to the extreme. If you know the story, you'll follow along with me, but I'll just tell you, if not, they literally plan to kill him, but their oldest brother talks some sense into them, and he's like, hey, let's just throw him into this pit. So they throw him into this pit, and then the older brother, it like goes off, and he plans to kind of save them, but the rest of the siblings see this trading caravan come by. They literally sell him as a slave. It's this wild story, right? I think the Bible's pretty interesting. They sell him into slavery, and this is what happens. Pick it up a couple chapters later. Chapter 39, verse 1. It says, now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. Just pause with me for a second. Joseph was betrayed. These are his brothers. Not like to take it out of the funny frame of mind and just be serious for a second, right? Like, have you guys ever felt betrayed? Felt like a person who was supposed to have your back turned their back on you, or maybe even the more kind of visceral way to put it, stabbed you in the back. Have you guys ever felt that? Joseph did. He felt betrayed. He must have, right? He literally was betrayed. But look at this key thing that happens. It's the first iteration of something really important that we're going to see repeated throughout this story. Look at verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. Even though Joseph was betrayed, God was with him. There's this interesting dynamic that we start to see, this pattern that starts to arise in Joseph's life, where there's a difference between what people do to him and how God responds. See, lots of times, guys, in our lives, we can incorrectly relate what happens to us in the world with how God feels about us. We can start to think that what happens in our lives has something to say about how close God is to us. And so let's think about that struggle that, if we're honest, we have in our lives as we look at this story with Joseph. Because people betrayed Joseph, yet God was with him. The second thing that happens to Joseph is accused. He's accused of something he didn't do. What we see at the end of chapter 39 here, right, is that he is successful in this house. Even though he was sold as a slave, God was with him, and he's able to rise him up into this kind of second-in-command position in the house of his master. He's doing what he's supposed to do. He's being faithful, and that's when temptation strikes. Okay, if you guys know this story, you know that there's this, it's kind of funny when you read it. Potiphar, his master, his wife, has the hots for Joseph. And she starts going after him. It says day by day, she is trying to seduce him. She's trying to get him to sleep with her, and he doesn't do it. Go Joseph, right? Take notes, everybody in college. This is what you really have to take notes about is one day, Potiphar's wife grabs his shirt, and Joseph just books it. He just runs, again, take notes, okay? Just run away. But here's what happens is Potiphar's wife accuses Joseph of doing the opposite, that he was actually the one pursuing her. And this is what it says, chapter 39, verse 19. As soon as his master, Potiphar, heard the words that his wife spoke to him, the spin, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in prison. Joseph gets thrown into prison for something he didn't even do. You guys ever felt like you got punished for something you didn't even do? Somebody misunderstood, or somebody legitimately had your hurt in mind to elevate themselves. Or they truly were, like this situation, trying to get you to do something that you know wasn't right, and you don't fall into it, yet you still get hurt. You still get ridiculed. You still get accused. Guys, as believers, there's going to be all kinds of situations in our lives where if we're living and following God's calling, if we're trying to live in accordance with His word and His principles in a world that doesn't, we're going to get falsely accused and punished for being righteous too. When we actually don't fall into temptation, lots of times that's when life gets hard, and we think in our flesh that it should be the opposite, right? If we're following God, things should go well, but that's actually not the pattern we see in Scripture. The pattern we see is this, and the question is, are we okay with that? Are we okay with being put in the prison because we're being faithful to God? Look at what Joseph experiences while in prison in verse 21. It says, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison." This is now the second time we've seen this pattern emerge where Joseph goes through something in the world from people that is awful. Yet, what do we see? God was with him. He showed him steadfast love. Is it okay with you to be accused, to be slandered, to have names said about you by people in the world if you're being faithful to God because no matter what anybody else says, I know God's with me. Does that settle our hearts? Joseph was betrayed, he was accused, and then also he was forgotten. He was forgotten. At the end of this verse here in chapter 39, right, we see that the same pattern happens again with Joseph, where he's kind of elevated in his crappy situation, yet he's lifted up by God. God gives him this position of authority. And this crazy thing happens in the prison. I'm going to zoom through a lot of chapters here, but just stay with me. Stay with me now. He is elevated to this position, and Pharaoh throws some of his chief officials into prison with Joseph, and they have these wild dreams, okay? They're like, they don't know what's going on, they're freaking out. And Joseph, since he is walking with God, he has this confidence to say, hey, I can probably help you figure this out. God will tell you what's going on. And so the cupbearer of Pharaoh, who's in prison, Joseph is like, your dream is actually good, bro. Pharaoh's gonna reinstate you. No worries. The baker, not so much. You're gonna get beheaded. It's kind of brutal. But that's what happens is Joseph correctly predicts what's gonna happen to these two guys. Again, we're flying through this. But he says to the cupbearer, he says, hey, can you just remember me? I've been thrown in here, and it's not the right thing. I've been thrown in here, and I didn't do anything wrong. He says, only remember me when you're reinstated, when this comes true. Remember me. And then look at the verse, or the 23rd verse, rather, of Genesis chapter 40. It says, yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. The context around there is that the cupbearer was restored. Joseph was right, rather God was right, and he gave Joseph his insight. But then the cupbearer forgets him. And the next verse, the first verse of the next chapter, literally starts with after 2 whole years. After 2 whole years. There's just nothing in the story for 2 years. And guys, have you ever felt like you've been waiting for God to pick your story back up? Like there's a pause and you're just like, when is something else going to happen? God, I'm trying to do what's right. I'm in this situation because I'm following you, God. Why aren't you doing anything? Why is this still happening to me? Why doesn't anybody look out for me, remember me, do something positive for me? Why is everyone out to get me? Has that ever felt like your situation? The crazy thing about Joseph's story is even though there's this huge gap, there's 2 years of nothing, at the end of that time, we do see that Joseph, even though he had just been betrayed, he'd just been accused, he'd just been forgotten, we see that Joseph actually was in exactly the right place at the right time to be used by God for his good purpose. You can see, we can throw it up on the screen and I'll just summarize in Genesis 41, the rest of the chapter, you see that Joseph does the same thing he did with the cupbearer and the baker with Pharaoh himself. That Pharaoh has this crazy dream he doesn't understand, and the cupbearer finally remembers Joseph and brings him back up to the palace, and Joseph has this chance to be who he was meant to be, to step into what God had actually been up to all along. And this is what happens, right? Pharaoh receives this opportunity and instates Joseph as the second in command, not of a household anymore, not of a prison, but of the whole land. And Egypt is like the ruling empire of the time. They are in charge, and now Joseph is in charge. And so what happens after this is Joseph is able to keep the people of Egypt alive. There's this crazy famine that happens. That's what Pharaoh's dreams were all about. And he is now in charge. And Joseph's own brothers, who betrayed him at the beginning, remember, who sold him into slavery, who started this whole process, they actually are now in need of Joseph's help. And they actually come to Joseph. And it's this really long part of the story that we're currently reading in our Bible plan that I'm going to zoom through. Basically, Joseph goes through this process of figuring out if his brothers are genuine, if they actually have changed, if they really do want to come to terms with the evil that they've done. And so what happens is he eventually lets them in and believes that they've come around. And then towards the end of the book of Genesis, it says in chapter 50, verse 15, the brothers are now with Joseph. Jacob has passed away at this point, and it says that it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. Right? That's a valid fear that the brothers have. Right? They've done something really messed up. And now Joseph actually is in the position to take his revenge. But look at what Joseph says in verse 19. It says that Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God?" You guys remember, if you're here last week, what we talked about with the whole origin of sin? Light topic, right? The whole beginning of how darkness entered into the world, how Satan tempted Adam and Eve to go away from God. What did he tempt them with? That they could be God themselves. That they could take into their own hands the definition of what's right and wrong for themselves, what's best for them, that they could take hold of it. And Joseph here, even though he's been through all of this darkness in his own life, this abandonment and betrayal, he now actually is in the place, technically, of God. He could judge his brothers and say, "Hey, my servants who are all at my command, just kill these guys." And they would have done it. Yet, Joseph refuses to take hold of what is only God's. There's this whole crazy concept in the Bible, guys, where we as believers are asked to trust that God will take care of evil in the end. That leave it to the Lord who will judge the brokenness. Don't take it for yourself. Here's the perspective that we can have, that Joseph had. Look at Genesis 50, verse 20 with me. I think this verse is not only a beautiful encapsulation of this story, but I think it encapsulates the whole book of Genesis, and I think it points us forward to the entire story of the Bible. Genesis 50, verse 20 says, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." Guys, it's really hard to reconcile evil things that happen in our world with a good God. It is. It's hard to think about the Creator God, like we've been talking about, who made everything, who is in charge and above it all, and yet there's these things that happen in our world, in our lives, that are wrong, that are not good, that are evil. And I think in this perspective that Joseph has, we can find some comfort. That's not just everything happens for a reason. I think that statement is well-intentioned, but I think it's actually inaccurate. Because when people say that statement, lots of times they're saying, "Hey, what happened isn't actually bad. Like, it's actually, like, if you really think about it, it's going to work out, so it's not bad. It's good. Everything happens for a reason. It's all good." But I think if we are real about our world, about our lives, about the Bible, we see evil. We see darkness. We see the opposite of what God made, the good and loving relationship between us and Him and between us and people. We see it broken all the time. I know I have in my life. I've seen it in people around me. And it's wrong. It's not good. It's bad. So how do we reconcile that if we're really honest about how bad things can be? I think we look at this story and how this conclusion points us to the story of the whole Bible. And you guys in the band, you guys can come back up. This story points us to the story, because what people meant for evil, God meant for good. That's what Joseph concludes. He doesn't conclude that, hey guys, it's okay. What you did to me, it's fine. Because look at what happened. It wasn't bad. No, he's real, right? He's real that they betrayed him. I'm sure Joseph would have been real about, hey, Potiphar's wife, you accused me of something that wasn't true. That was wrong. Yet, God meant it for good. God is able to use the most broken, the most dark, the most evil things that happen to us, that happen around us, and He can work it together for good. God isn't a God that says, hey, actually, it wasn't that bad. Actually, have you thought about it this way? It's all good. No, God is real with the brokenness and the pain, because how do I know this, guys? Jesus died on a cross. The only perfect person to ever live, the only person who never did anything wrong, who never hurt another person in his life, who never lied, never cheated, never betrayed anybody. You know what happened to him? He was brutally killed in the most excruciating way possible. Even that word excruciating comes from the concept of Roman crucifixion. It was the worst possible way to die, and the perfect man died that way. That's wrong, right? That's evil. That's broken. Yet God meant it for good, to bring about what is now being done, the salvation of many. That God uses the evil that happens. God can use the things that are wrong, that are evil, that happen to you, that happen to the people around you. He can use even the worst of things to bring about His ultimate purpose. God sees. God cares for you. God is with you in the worst situation. He is there, and He's not sugarcoating. He is the good, just judge that will deal with evil for all time. He either has dealt with it on the cross, or He will in eternity. He doesn't let anything go. He doesn't shove anything under the rug. And He loves you while we're still waiting for Jesus to come back. How amazing is it that God gives us this glimpse, even from the beginning of His plan? What we mean for evil, what people mean for evil, God means for good. He can work it all together for good, just like it says in Romans 8. Guys, in Christ, this is true of us. When you feel abandoned or betrayed, God will never betray or abandon you. Because of Jesus, you are declared righteous and free, not accused and imprisoned. And God will never forget you. There's nothing that can separate you from His love. And look, guys, I know that it's still confusing. I know that when it hurts real bad, it's harder to hear a message like this and to say, yeah. But with everything I've been through, with everything I've experienced, the brokenness in my family, the betrayal I felt from others, the accusations I felt in my life, how I felt forgotten and abandoned, I've also felt God's nearness in the hardest of times. And I've seen even this happen, that His good purposes prevail. They have prevailed in my life again and again and again, even through the worst of times, even through the evil that happens to me and around me. Guys, that's the story of Genesis. It's the story of people choosing evil and God still working it together for good. So God, we just thank You and praise You that that's who You are. That You are the God of redemption and restoration. God, that You don't see the brokenness and paint over it. You see it and You entered into it. You said, I have a plan. I will take it upon myself. Thank you, Jesus, that's exactly what you did. That you gave us all the chance to be near to you, even though we walk away from you. Even though we are the lost sheep, you chase after us. God, would you help us as we do go through things in our lives that are confusing, that are hard, that are painful, God? Would you help us to trust in your character, trust in who you are, that you will work it together for good, even when it doesn't make sense, even when we can't believe it right now. Help us to choose to trust in you, God. Thank you that you are the God who works it all together, who can bring about good even from the worst situation. God, help us to trust you, to walk with you as we go through the rest of this year together. Give us your eyes to see what you are doing through it all. Lord, we love you and praise you, and it's in